Today, we're going to show you how to install Philips LED integral beam headlights. It's a job almost any do-it-yourselfer can handle, and it requires only a few items to do the job right. Philips LED integral beam headlights are universal LED replacement upgrades for conventional halogen sealed beam headlights, and they're compatible with DOT regulations. In some vehicles, the existing vehicle wiring harness will plug directly into the Philips LED integral beam headlights connector, and the headlights will work normally. But in other vehicles, wiring harness adapters will be necessary if the vehicle's wiring harness has a connector that's not compatible with the integral beam headlights connector. Philips LED integral beam headlights use H4 type connectors, and we're first going to explain how to make the connection in vehicles with H4 type vehicle harness connectors. If your vehicle wiring harness has a different style connector, you need to purchase wiring harness adapters that are H4 female on one end and have a male connector that's compatible with your headlight wiring harness on the other end. And stand by, because we're getting to you after we demonstrate H4 connectors. Some vehicle wiring harnesses do have the H4 type connectors that are compatible with the integral beam headlights, but the LED headlights don't work normally when the harness is plugged in. For instance, the high beam may come on when the headlight control is in the low beam position, or the headlights may not come on at all. In this case, you need to purchase wiring harness adapters that have a female H4 connector on one end and spade terminals on the other end. This will allow you to connect each wire from the integral beam headlight into the appropriate slot on the vehicle wire harness connector. If you need wiring harness adapters, purchase one for each headlight. The adapters are inexpensive and can be found online by searching for adapter wiring harness sockets. Once you've determined whether you'll need harness adapters and have purchased them if needed, you can get started. First, put the headlight control in the off position. Disconnect the headlight wiring harness from one headlight. If your vehicle's wiring harness connector plugs directly into the Philips integral beam headlight socket, apply some dielectric grease to the wiring harness connector and plug it into the integral beam headlights connector. Next, check whether the new headlight provides correct operation for high beam, low beam, and off positions. If you have correct headlight operation, wrap the connectors with corrosion protection tape to seal the connection. Then you can install the new LED integral beam headlight and repeat the procedure on the other headlight. But if you've connected your vehicle wiring harness to the integral beam and do not have normal high beam, low beam, and off function, you'll need to purchase the two wiring harness adapters we mentioned that have a female H4 connector on one end and spade terminals on the other end. When you have those wiring harness adapters in hand, apply some dielectric grease to the connector sockets and then plug the wiring harness adapter onto the integral beam headlight connector. Put the headlight controls in the low beam on position. Use a voltage tester to determine which slots in the vehicle wiring harness connector correspond with low beam, high beam, and ground. Once you know which slots on the vehicle harness connector correspond to low, high, and ground, fill the connector slots with dielectric grease to seal the connections. Plug the adapter wiring harness spade terminals into the vehicle wiring harness connectors so that the vehicle wiring harness is connected to the appropriate low, high, and ground wires from the integral beam headlight. Coming from the headlamp, the black wire is ground, white is high beam, and red is low beam. The H4651 has only two wire connectors. Black is ground and red is high beam. Use the vehicle headlight controls to confirm that the integral beam headlight operates normally. If it does not operate normally, use a voltage meter to recheck the vehicle harness connector slots for low beam, high beam, and ground connections. When correct operation is confirmed, wrap the connection in corrosion protection tape to protect the connections. Then you can install the integral beam headlight in place of the standard headlight. Retest the headlight controls to check operation and then repeat the procedure for the other headlight. Now, if your installation requires a wire harness adapter that's different than the H4 adapters, you'll need to purchase the correct wiring harness adapters for your vehicle's wiring harness. But otherwise, the installation procedure is basically very similar to what we've shown. Be sure to use dielectric grease in the connector sockets to seal the connection. And if you have a connection where two sockets meet, use corrosion protection tape to keep moisture out. Remember to test your headlight controls to make sure you have proper operation. And we strongly suggest you have your new integral beam headlights professionally aimed to make sure you're getting the benefit of their beam. Now you've got the brighter, wider look of your new Philips LED integral beam headlights.
Innovation and you. Philips.